The Democratic Alliance says its first policy conference will focus on the values of the party and envision the role of government as the country faces multiple socio-economic ills. Now, the party has just concluded its briefing on its upcoming virtual policy conference, which starts tomorrow. Now, for more of what came out from that briefing, we're joined now in the studio by our senior politics reporter, Ziyanda Ngcobo. Lovely to have you with us, Ziyanda.
Thanks, Thami.
So, a quick recap of what transpired this afternoon at that particular briefing.
So there are two things that the DA was doing today. It was, of course, giving us an update on the state of preparedness for that conference. It's going to be held over 2 days. And the first day, they'll be dealing namely with values and principles of the party, which they say over the last couple of years, many members have misinterpreted what the values and principles are, but also you cannot formulate policy just on an evidence-based research, but also you do need to have some sort of agreement on the values and principles of the party. They were then probed on values and principles and the fact that they're not static. These do actually change. And Ngubeni, who's the head of the DA's policy unit, does concede that. And of course, this will then segue the party into day 2 of their program, which will look at economic exclusion and the policy on how to deal with that. Now, of course, we know the DA has always faced issues when it comes to race and whether or not they consider race to be a part of the economic and socio-economic ills in society. And Ngubeni again saying that race, yes, is important, but it's just one of the many issues that contribute to inequality in the country. In fact, she says it's a distraction to only focus on race, which I think is part of the reason why we've seen so many leaders leaving the party. It's part of the reason why Mmusi Maimane as well, there was a lot of disagreement about the line of direction and agenda that the DA was setting ahead of those general elections that we had last year. So certainly this policy conference is so important in terms of giving South Africans and DA delegates an idea of what they have on offer for the local government elections, but of course more immediately that elective Congress that's expected to be held now in October.
And I guess when we talk about issues of value and principles, I mean, where does the DA stand regarding that? As you said, and as they rightfully said, that values are constantly shifting. As it stands now, what seem to be the values of the Democratic Alliance, especially considering the fact that so many of its black leaders have actually left, the latest being John Moody, and this also ties into the race issue, and yes, that's going to happen on the second day, where Moody is saying that there's an internal purging of black people within the party, and the fact that the DA is now leaning to the right.
Well, this is exactly the questions that, were sidestepped, I would say, actually, by DA policy head Ngubeni when she actually referred to the issues of race as a distraction, because she even used the example of happiness. She said some things are not necessarily easy to measure, but they are a proxy of a much larger problem. So, of course, she acknowledged, that the private sector needs to jump on board more often when it comes to dealing with societal ills. But in her assessment and in the proposals that are currently before the party, race is just one of the many strands of issues. But this is going to be a critical issue, Thami, especially because one of my questions was whether or not new proposals will be allowed from the floor during this conference. They are not going to be allowing that time. In fact, they're saying that all the proposals would have been submitted beforehand, and this is either to amend the current proposals or to rubber stamp them. Now, this is also, I heard you speaking to Ziyanda Ngcobo. It's actually going to feed into the toxicity within the party, because already the detractors of Helen Zille and by implication Ngubeni are saying that this weekend's conference is going to be a mere rubber stamping of policies that are actually being pushed by Zille and Ngubeni. Why? They're not going to be allowed to actually raise new proposals. And the second thing is the issue of this conference not being opened up to the public and the media. media, which of course, yes, gives, a vacuum or opportunity for rumor mongering and false news. But also the party has been saying that it's transparent, that it's open, that it's positioning itself as a possible leader of society, and yet you have such an important conference that is discussing policy that would shape, the agenda of South Africa, but it's not open to the public. So certainly we're expecting those issues to be topical. We asked as well whether or not they're expecting a virtual walkout. Of course, we know this is being held virtually. And Dr. Ivan Meyer saying that they expect no such thing, that arguments and debates are part of the democratic process within the DA, and that everybody is disciplined and they don't anticipate, such activities.
And just picking up on what you were saying, that some of the DA members feel that this policy conference is merely a rubber stamping of what's already been, pre-imposed. Here's what another DA delegate said, I quote, "This conference is really only going to be where people talk about the policy that has already been imposed." So a real sense of a feeling like they're being spoken to from the members of the Democratic Alliance. How does this bode for democracy then, and openness within the party, something that John Moody also spoke about, saying that there are voices that are being muted within the party?
I mean, it's exactly what I was just speaking about now, that this weekend many just feel as though, they'll just be there virtually. But also the issue, first of all, actually starts with the fact that many didn't even want this conference to be held virtually. Let me just start there, where they felt that this needed to be done in person. But of course, we know there are COVID-19 regulations. But however, there was a big fight, Thami, over the fact that why should there be a rush to have this policy congress and even this elective congress? And we know that the argument that was put forward by Zilla and others within the Federal Council was that actually, there needs to be a leader to take charge of, party structures ahead of the local government elections, that John Steenhuisen didn't feel as though he was being taken seriously by the structures within the party. But many on the other side will tell you that that's not necessarily their problem. The issues of the DA don't lie with the fact that it doesn't have a permanent head. The issues that are facing the DA are related to race. They're related to the toxicity, related to along racial lines, in actual fact, and the fact that the DA has not been clear for the longest time where it stands ideologically, and the fact that there is this perception that the DA wants to go back to just being a 20% party that excludes, the majority of black people, but as long as it serves white interests, in particular because the DA lost a lot of its votes to the Freedom Front Plus during the last local government elections, and that's of course also fed into the theories about why Helen Zille returned as federal chairperson. So nevertheless, this conference is still, Thami, expected to be divided along racial lines, and the racial lines extend to many issues. When you're talking about land, when you're talking about traditional leadership, when you're talking to, how you approach education issues. Still, again, and as much as Ngwenya says that race seems to be a distraction, these are actually the issues that many delegates within the DA and the South African public at large want to hear. Where do they stand? And I think they were also asked about triple BE and whether or not they actually want to get rid of that. And there was still, a bit of back and forth around this. So certainly a lot more clarity needing to come from the DA this weekend.
And also, just as, we're talking now, the huge realization and the big question is who sets the agenda? Yes. Should the agenda not be set by your constituents? Should the agenda not be set by those who are going to be voting for you, those whom you are going to be leading? Just some of the questions are there. But thank you so much for that, Ziyanda. Good chatting to you. That's our Ziyanda Ngcobo, they are senior politics reporter. As we deliberate on the Democratic Alliance, they will be having their policy congress coming up this weekend. And as we know, a little bit later on in the year, at the end of October, 30th of October, 31st of October and the 1st of November, they'll be having then that virtual elective conference.